Welcome to the Breakup Recovery Podcasts by your host, Barbara Stevens. Discover the wisdom and remarkable insights of Barbara Stevens, breakup recovery mentor, author, and public speaker. Barbara offers programs and solutions for any breakup so you can turn your life around, create lasting changes for the better, and embrace life again.
Hello and welcome to Breakup Recovery Podcast. I'm Barbara Stevens and I'm a breakup recovery mentor. And in this episode, I have with me Julia Hasche. Now, Julia is a single mum and founder of Single Mother Survival Guide, which is an amazing website, www.singlemothersurvivalguide.com. Julia also has a podcast with the same name, Single Mother Survival Guide, which is a podcast made by a single mum for other single mums. So welcome, Julia.
Hi, Barbara. How's it going?
Good. Before we talk about your podcast, can you tell me a bit about yourself and your own breakup?
I'm 33 years old and I started dating my partner. We were never married in 2011, end of 2011. And it was funny because I'd had a really rough year that year. I'd had pretty much the worst year of my life. I had broken off an engagement a week before our wedding was supposed to happen. We'd been together for 4 years, broke off that wedding. I knew in my heart it wasn't the right thing to do. And then a few months later, I started dating a man who I ended up in an abusive relationship with. So I was kind of a broken person, I think, when I met the father of my daughter. And our relationship sort of progressed quite quickly because we'd been friends for about 2 years. We worked together. So when we sort of started in a relationship, and he'd sort of supported me through what had happened that year. And we were working together in Queensland, and then we decided to move over to Western Australia because we were both working in the mining industry. And I'd always wanted to do a stint there working, and he had previously lived there and loved it. So he was pretty excited to go back. We ended up resigning and moving over to WA, to Perth, and we moved into a house together. It sort of happened quite quickly. So we were sort of together only 4 or 5 months. We moved in together. We started talking about having children. We didn't want to waste any time. And after my broken engagement the year before, I didn't really have this immediate desire to get married. And he didn't really either. And, in hindsight, it's probably not a great sign. But anyway, we decided to try for a baby. Cracks started appearing pretty quickly, actually. And it's the beauty of hindsight again. At the time, I didn't think there were big issues, and it wasn't really until it was too late that I realised that our relationship had some, serious problems. So he didn't, for example, he didn't want me to spend time with other people without him. He was very possessive. He was very jealous. He didn't like me talking to my family on the phone, and they were in New South Wales. So that was really difficult. I used to hide in the bathroom so I could speak to my family. At the time, I just didn't see how serious it was. Things sort of came to a head when I was at this sort of bar next to my work at the time, and we were having sort of a Friday drinks there with one of our clients that we just had a meeting with, and he just came in and started screaming at me and really inappropriate. And it wasn't until that sort of moment where I saw myself in the eyes of other people that I thought, oh my God, this is insane. Like, this is so inappropriate and this behavior is not normal. So I ended the relationship then, and we had already started trying for a baby, and it was the first month that we'd actually tried. And I just assumed I wasn't pregnant. I didn't even think that it didn't occur to me that it would happen so quickly. And about a week later, I took a pregnancy test and I discovered that I was pregnant. It was hard because although I was absolutely thrilled, all I really ever wanted was to be a mum. Not ever, but, I really wanted to be a mum. But I also panicked because I was sort of like, this isn't how my life was supposed to be. I was supposed to be in love. I was supposed to be, the happiest I've ever been. And it was a really big shock for me. So once, I went to the doctor, obviously confirmed the pregnancy and spoke to him about it. And we decided to try and work it out. And we began seeing a relationships counsellor. And pretty much all through the pregnancy, we tried to work on our relationship. But the problem was that we just had so many issues. There were so many differences that really didn't make us ideal as a couple. We had different opinions on family, education, parenting, friendship, travel, life goals, politics, you name it. We disagreed. So the counselling didn't help that much because it was really hard for us to compromise because the big things we really couldn't agree on. Me wanting to speak to my family, he was not okay with it. And so it was really hard for me to sort of come to some sort of a compromise. When I was about 6 months pregnant, we broke up again and I moved out and I set up a home for my baby and I was really struggling during that time because it wasn't what I envisaged my life to be. It was really difficult for me. And after about a month, I decided, no, this is too hard. I need to try and work this out. So I moved back in with him and I was too fixated really on how I thought my life should be rather than the reality, and things change and you just have to sort of adapt to that. But anyway, our relationship didn't last. And, when my daughter was born, we had a lot of disagreements about parenting and controlled crying, and he was totally fine with it. I wasn't, every single issue. I think having a child really has a huge impact on even the best of relationships. And because our relationship was already, hanging by a thread, it really just didn't make it easy at all. So when my baby was 2 months old, we split up and we continued to live together for another 3 months after that, which was really, really, really tough. And then when my baby was 5 months old, her and I moved back to Sydney. And that was something that we had discussed. We continued to go to counselling sort of after we realised that it was not really, our relationship was not going to work. We continued to go to sort of work out how we can best co-parent and try and set up some sort of a system. We moved back and he stayed in Perth and he still lives there now. So my daughter's almost 4. All this happened about 4 years ago. A pretty tumultuous time in my life.
Julia, how do you co-parent with a person who you describe as abusive, so someone who has such different values and views to you? How do you make that work?
With great difficulty. It's really, really hard, and it's something I really struggle with. I think initially it was very difficult, and the verbal agreement that we had made, he didn't stick with. So we'd planned to Skype every week so that he could see her. And, obviously when she's a baby, she's not talking. But, I thought he would want to see her. And so the plan was that he was to come to Sydney every 4 months and I would go to Perth with her every 4 months in between. So alternating. So sort of he would end up seeing her every 2 months, if that makes sense. Yeah, he didn't stick with that at all. And I was sort of initiating the contact all the time. I would send him a message, every week saying, do you want to Skype tomorrow? And he wouldn't reply. I just felt like I was, hitting my head against a wall. Nothing was happening. And then we actually ended up in court because it was for a different issue. But the reason why it eventuated was because he wouldn't sign for a passport for my daughter. And I really wanted to take her overseas. One of my brothers was living in Thailand at the time, and there were discussions of a family trip, and I wanted to take her there. It was something that I'd raised with him for a couple of years, and he just was so adamant that he was not going to sign it ever, and that she could sign one when she was old enough if she wanted to. So I ended up getting legal advice and sort of started the ball rolling on how I could get one. Yeah, we ended up in court and the judge said, yes, of course, she can have a passport. But while we were there, it was actually a real blessing because the judge was quite horrified to his sort of lack of involvement. and sort of issued these court orders, which was basically based on our verbal agreement. But it was actually, I'm really glad we ended up in court, because if those court orders hadn't been made, then I don't think we would have got back on track so easily. So after that, it was a lot easier, and we sort of started our agreement again. But something that I've really learnt was you can't control what other people do. You can only try as hard as you can, and you can be nice and respectful and polite, but you cannot control how someone treats you or if they even respond to you. There's this saying, the serenity prayer. You probably know of it. And it's, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I would just recite that to myself, because there's some things that you just can't change. You just have to accept it and do what you can. And that's it, really, and you've just got to hope that things work out. And then the other thing that I learned is just not to engage with him so much, because we'd just end up in these huge arguments over nothing, and it was just ridiculous. It's not healthy for my daughter to see that sort of thing. So it's a work in progress, definitely, co-parenting. I think it's difficult enough, even if you're friends and you get along quite well. Yeah, in our situation, it's even harder.
So tell me, Julia, was that a turning point, the court case, in terms of his behaviour towards his daughter?
I think it was, actually. I was surprised that he actually turned up, because he had expressed such little interest or barely any communication with me. It was usually just I was completely ignored or I was really attacked. Yeah, I didn't expect to see him there. I was actually really, really devastated, because it really hurt me that he flew all the way to Sydney to go to court, but he couldn't fly to Sydney to see his daughter, if that makes sense. But it was a turning point. I think for him to have a judge and sort of have a go at him for his sort of lack of involvement, and also the way he treated me, because I had an affidavit with hundreds of pages of abusive text messages, and she was sort of, how on earth is it acceptable to treat the mother of your daughter like that? You might not be together, but you cannot speak to her like that. He really listened. It was a turning point, absolutely.
Did he come up with an excuse as to why he didn't have much involvement with your daughter? Do you think it had to do with the fact that he had no more control over you, therefore he lost interest in you, and that's probably why he didn't make an effort to see his daughter or interact with her in any way?
I think there's a couple of reasons. I think he definitely felt the sort of loss of control, and that's probably why, I think it's definitely the reason why he didn't sign for a passport, because it was the one thing that he could really control. I mean, I'm not going to leave the country without my baby. By controlling my daughter's passport, or lack of, is basically preventing my freedom as well. There was that sort of control issue. He's a great dad. He really is. I can't deny he's a wonderful dad, and my daughter and him have a great bond despite everything that's happened. And for him, it was probably more of I think maybe he found it too hard. I think the whole thing messed him up as well, didn't seem to show much emotion or anything during the whole process, but I think it really did affect him. And I think for him, it was maybe easier to not see her and not have to hear about her and all that sort of thing than sort of missing her so much. Do you know what I mean?
So, Julia, we haven't really had much time to talk about your podcast, Single Mother's Survival Guide, so I'm going to have to get you back on another time.
No problem.
I hope you will come back another time to talk about your podcast and some of the things that podcast offers.
Yeah, I'd love to.
And what information people can expect to get from listening to your podcast. So thank you for coming on to talk about your experience about your breakup and the difficulties that you went through. I think a lot of women can relate to your story, so thank you for doing that, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, I'd love to, Barbara. Thank you for having me.
If you feel that you are still struggling with your breakup, If you're experiencing intense feelings of anger, resentment, and bitterness, and it is taking over your life, I'm here to help you in this area of moving on and coping after your breakup. I work with my clients one-on-one through my mentoring program. If you want to learn more about how we can work together, contact me via email or my Facebook page, Barbara Stevens Breakup Recovery Mentor, and book in for my free 30-minute sounding board session, and we can set up a time that suits. In this free session, you will walk away with clarity about your situation, strategies and tools to start building the future you deserve, so together we can start your journey of recovery. All my information is on my website, www.barbarastevens.com.au. If you don't want to miss an episode of Breakup Recovery Podcast, subscribe on iTunes, and I would appreciate it if you could take the time to write a review and rate the podcast. Also, feel free to message me with any questions that you have about Breakup Recovery podcasts or subjects that you want me to cover in future podcast episodes by clicking on the contact button of my website or my Facebook page. I'm always looking for ways to help you recover from your breakup. And the last thing I'd like to say is, be gentle on yourself. You deserve happiness.
If you would like to hear previous Breakup Recovery podcasts, visit barbarastevens.com.au. Connect with Barbara Stevens on social media with Barbara Stevens Breakup Recovery Mentor on Facebook and at You'll Be Okay on Twitter. Read further blogs, view webinar replays, and download your free ebook, 3 Easy Steps to Surviving Your Breakup, and much more at barbarastevens.com.au.